How can I tell if it is my anxious attachment or if he's just not that into me? So this is a great question. I hear it a lot. So you want to think about, how do you feel when you have met someone new, the sparks are flying, and maybe the butterflies have kicked up in your belly, and it seems like things are spinning and they just won't settle down. And you're not sure if that uneasiness is some aspect of your intuition that is trying to speak to you. Maybe you're getting a gut feeling about it, but it's kind of hard to read it because you're worried maybe this is just my anxiety getting away or getting in the way. And so you might be left with a feeling of being anxious, confused, or self-blaming. Maybe you're wondering, am I just sabotaging something good, or am I ignoring red flags because I just don't want to be alone? So you might start questioning those things. Now, if you've ever found yourself stuck in that spot between self-doubt and suspicion, especially early in the dating experience, in this segment, I want to help you kind of tune into what is yours, what is theirs, and how you can get clear on that so you can show up with more self-trust and what I like to call emotional self-sovereignty. Okay. So let's start by exploring what might be happening underneath this question. So maybe you have started seeing someone who is calm, kind, consistent, but something in you is kind of a panicky feeling. It is a panicking at the lack of urgency or intensity that's present in the relationship. Or maybe you're on the other end of the spectrum. The communication is inconsistent and you're not sure if you're being avoidant of red flags, or maybe I'm being overly sensitive due to my past wounds. So we might be on either end of that spectrum. Both of those experiences can come with those feelings of self-doubt, fear of rejection, or the impulse to try to chase down clarity and force a said commitment before someone is ready or before they can pull away. So the three important aspects to this question that I would identify are that number one, anxious attachment can distort our perception of emotional pacing. So what's normal for someone that's more securely attached can feel like disinterest for someone that might be more anxious because they exist on two ends of that spectrum. Secondly, slow or neutral behavior is not always a red flag. It could just be a sign of healthy pacing. And third, inconsistency, on the other hand, is a valid cue, not just an anxious overreaction. So we shouldn't necessarily immediately doubt our perceptions. We may just want to investigate the reality of what meaning we're making out of it. So I think it's important that we dig into these points because this is how we're going to build that muscle of discernment so we don't abandon our needs or dismiss our intuition. Okay. So the three takeaways that I want you to get out of this. Number one, anxious attachment can sometimes mistake steady calmness for coldness and vice versa. People who have anxious attachment can misinterpret a kind of cold detachment as emotional calm. Okay. Secondly, your intuition is wise, but it needs an emotional regulation in order to be trustworthy. And inconsistency is a signal of their emotional confusion, not necessarily a challenge for you to have to prove your worth. So let's unpack this. Number one, calmness is not the same as coldness. So anxious attachment can sometimes mistake, people who have anxious attachment can sometimes mistake a steady calmness for coldness. And just as easily, we can confuse emotional detachment for emotional maturity. Okay. And well, why does that happen? Because when you have been conditioned to associate love with intensity, then emotional highs and lows or unpredictable validation or inconsistent validation, the rush of being chosen and right after you've been dropped, then when you encounter a calm, steady, grounded presence, that can feel, on the one hand, underwhelming. unfamiliar, and maybe even suspicious. So you might find yourself asking yourself, well, why doesn't he text me obsessively? Is he just not that into me because they're not overwhelmed by their passion for me? But a securely attached person isn't going to kind of test you in this way. They're going to show up more consistently. And if your nervous system is used to some kind of chaos or inconsistent love, then that steadiness can register as disinterest. And it's actually, whereas it might actually be the thing you're really looking for, which leads us to the flip side. So when we have anxious attachment, we don't only have that experience of seeking the familiar, we also have the experience of seeking what was missing, what we wanted, what we needed. So while you may be drawn to intensity or a kind of unavailability or inconsistent, unpredictable passion, another part of you is equally going to crave ease, stability, connection, and emotional reliability. So the challenge is when you've spent much of your life overstimulated by inconsistency or filling up the space just to try to be seen, always bracing for whatever the next emotional shift is going to be, it can become hard to tell the difference between what is genuine emotional maturity and true calm versus someone that's emotionally checked out and disconnected, unaffected. So what happens? Well, you might feel pulled towards someone who's distant, aloof, unavailable, because that kind of aloofness mimics a stillness that you never really had, but probably needed. And that's going to create a false sense of safety. So in that space, you might start to project onto them a depth of maturity that you assume must be there. Oh, they're just the strong silent type. When in reality, you're sensing a kind of absence, not grounded presence. Okay. And so this is where anxious attachment can get a little tricky. So we are longing for steadiness, but our internal compass isn't really calibrated to recognize it when it shows up. And because we might have lacked that kind of stable attunement growing up, our ability to discern that real emotional steadiness from dissociation or disengagement, for example, can be compromised. But it is not our fault per se. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It's just a survival adaptation. But learning to tell the difference will allow you to stop chasing after intensity or emotional unavailability and start choosing real connection. So the next time you find yourself spiraling, you might try just taking a pause, putting your hand on your heart, breathing, and asking yourself, or saying to yourself, they're taking their time, and I'm allowed to take mine too. And I'm just going to be in stillness until my environment rearranges itself around me to offer more clarity, because I don't need to be pushed around by ambiguity. I can sit with ambiguity. I can be with the not knowing. That's not going to push me around. Now you're tapping into that intuitive self, which leads us to the second point. Being able to access that intuition, that intuitive self, requires some degree of self-regulation, the ability to regulate your emotional energy. So how do I know if it's my anxiety talking or my, let's say, gut intuition trying to protect me? So that's a powerful inquiry. And here's the thing, both anxiety and your intuition live and communicate through the body, which is why it can feel so confusing and difficult to tell them apart sometimes. But they do carry very different energetic signatures and emotional intentions. So anxiety often arrives in the form of urgency. It rushes in fast and furious, demanding answers, pushing for clarity, spinning worst case scenarios. And so that urgency is a clue that your survival system is online. Something in you feels threatened. And so you're trying to protect yourself from being left, rejected, or abandoned. Whereas your intuition, on the other hand, speaks in a slower, softer voice. It's rooted not in fear, but in a kind of presence. It has a bird's eye view of your life and everything in it. And so while it can guide you away from unsafe people or situations, it does so without falling into an unending panic. So intuition is connected to the part of you that is timeless, spiritual, wise, and steady, and it does not rush you. So how do you begin to tell the difference? Well, one practice is just to slow down and get curious. Am I feeling activated in my body like I need to rush to fix this or control something right now with a sense of urgency? Or is there a sense that, I have to know, I have to act? Then that is more likely anxiety. But if your inner voice is saying something like, well, that doesn't feel quite right. Maybe I need to take a pause and observe this a little longer. Or, well, something feels off, but maybe I don't need to decide anything just yet. I'm going to lean in and see how this unfolds. That's more of an intuitive voice. Okay. And so the distinction is that anxiety is going to cloud your vision. It's going to trying to take over control, whereas intuition clears it and it guides you into discovering things for yourself. Anxiety is going to tighten your chest. It's going to shorten your breath. It's going to make you feel revved up. Whereas intuition slows the pulse. It softens your gaze and it opens you up to a deeper knowing. Okay. And being able to access that deeper knowing requires a degree of regulation. Softening the body means activating the vagus nerve, which is the part of you that can relate, that can identify the safety cues in your environment, that can find that inner place of calm. So it's just very hard to access that when you're in full-on defense mode. It's like trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a war zone. So we try to afford this kind of regulation by building a bridge back to the body, because when we are in that defense mode, usually the energy is running up to the head when we start spiraling. So we might use things like somatic grounding exercises, bringing the energy back down, allowing yourself to use the body's resources to process and churn that energy. Things like, and doing things proactively so you know how to do that in the moment. In my practices, that's guided visualizations, meditation, art making, embodied practices like authentic movement, rituals to create a safe and sacred place for yourself. Getting into a practice of connecting to my intuition when I'm not in an activated state so that I have a blueprint for that when I am. So when I feel the butterflies of activation, I don't assume it's a bad thing and run away, because that means fear is in control. I'm not going to leap to label it as a red or even a green flag. Instead, I'm going to say, well, what is this feeling trying to show me? And can I sit with it long enough to hear what might be beneath all the noise? Because, excitement and anxiety light up the same part of the brain. And the only difference lies in, how we are interpreting the sensation, how we're making meaning of the context. And I wouldn't want to give up all my butterflies just in case it might mean it won't work out. So that's an important point to make. Is it fear from the past, or is it guidance about the present and the future? And just be willing to sit with the not knowing for a little while, because eventually clarity will come. It's just giving it enough time and space to let that clarity rise to the surface. And now that brings me to the third point, which is that inconsistency can be a clue, not necessarily your anxiety. So let's also name this. If somebody is hot one day and cold the next, if they're pulling you close and then vanishing or sending you mixed signals, that is not your anxious attachment acting up. That is external inconsistency, and it is valid to feel anxious about it. You don't need to psychoanalyze their behavior, and you don't have to make excuses to cling tighter. You are allowed in that moment to take a step back and to notice there's something incongruent going on here. Because your emotional energy is sacred, and even if you do have an anxious pattern, that doesn't mean that you're reading it incorrectly or that your boundaries don't matter. So just drop a yes in the chat or the comments if any of this sounds familiar, or maybe this question is living rent-free in your brain. Is it just my anxious attachment, or are they not that into me? And if you can relate, here's a reframe that I would offer you. It is okay to slow down, to connect with your body, learn how to breathe and to regulate the energy moving through your body, and then to check the facts without blaming yourself for having a need for clarity. And if you've been holding your breath, kind of scanning for clues and second guessing every text, this is just your invitation to release that and exhale, because you're not too much. You may just be used to overfunctioning, and you're not needy. You're just learning how to ask for what you need without apologizing for it. And if someone can't meet you with consistency and clarity, that's not necessarily your anxious spiraling or even some kind of chemistry. It is confusion, and you have a right to ask for more than that. So take your time. Let your nervous system catch up to the kind of love that you want, that you are calling in. And remember that you don't have to perform in order to acquire that connection. The love that is right for you will feel steady, and you get to decide when you're ready to receive that.
Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week, and I wouldn't want you to miss out.